the recording started.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Okay, so thanks for joining to everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be located. So it's a few minutes past 9 o'clock in the morning in Germany now. Once again, thank you very much for joining to this very special OPC router training webinar today, because this is not about a special or unique plugin of OPC router. It's all about how to connect to Siemens systems, to different kinds of Siemens systems. So it's also a bit special for us, this kind of webinar. But as we know that lots of you are working with a lot of different kinds of Siemens devices, we always have a lot of questions on how to connect to a CNC machine, or to Siemens MindSphere, or to a special PLC, or to an RFID system, or whatever from Siemens. So we decided to do that special Siemens connectivity webinar today. Before we start, my name is Thorsten. I'm responsible for sales and marketing, and don't worry. So I don't want to bore you too much, as I'm a sales guy, and you know, sales presentations usually are boring. This is a training and not a sales or marketing session today. And my colleague Andrea, she will give you the training on Siemens connectivity in a few minutes. Just before she starts with the training, I will have a few slides where I speak about OPC router in general. So it should be done in 2 or 3 minutes. Just for those of you who have never worked with OPC router before, to give you a very quick and short introduction what OPC router is about. And before I start with my presentation, just for you the information that this session will be recorded. So if you don't like to be recorded in a Teams webinar, you still have the opportunity to leave the session right now. The advantage of the recording of that webinar is that we can provide you a link to download the webinar afterwards, so that you have the opportunity to rewatch or review the webinar, or to share it with your colleagues where you might, this kind of training could be interesting for. During the webinar, we would like to ask you to please mute your microphone to avoid background noises, and please to turn off your cameras, just to ensure optimal performance for the webinar. And if you should have some questions during the webinar, please don't hesitate to type those questions into the chat of Microsoft Teams, and we will try to answer your questions during Andrea's presentation, or we will take the opportunity to ask the questions directly to Andrea, so that she might show you how to do it, and how to solve your issue and your question in a live demonstration. So if you should have any question after that webinar, you can refer to our website, which is opc-router.com, and in the menu you will find a link to our international distributors page, and you will find your local distributors there. So if you would like to get the link, for example, for the recording, or if you should have any technical questions regarding OPC router, just please refer to your local distributor, or send us an email at sales@inray.de, and we will be happy to send you the download link for the webinar, or to answer your technical questions. So as said, I don't want to bore you too much in the beginning. So I have to share 3 slides about OPC router in general, to give you a very, very high level and quick overview about what OPC router is and what it does. For those of you who've never heard or worked with OPC router, the name might be a bit misleading, because OPC might let you think that OPC router can only communicate with OPC data sources or OPC data targets, which is not the case. So there are more than 40 protocols and drivers supported, but historically, OPC router in the beginning was mainly able to speak OPC, But over the 15 years that OPC router is now on the market, the amount of plugins grew dramatically. And router might give you the idea that it could be a hardware solution, hardware gateway, something like this, which is also not the case. So OPC router is a software-based communication platform which you can install on a server or PC and connect to any kind of automation device or IT device. So it doesn't matter if it's an ERP solution or a PLC or an RFID system or a cloud or a database or a printer or whatever. So lots of available plugins and lots of available connections, connecting different kinds of systems, shop floor systems with shop floor systems, top floor systems with top floor systems, and also shop floor systems with top floor systems. So there's no limitation on that end. And the special value add OPC router offers is, from my perspective, of course, it's automatically transferring your data and so on. So that is what that solution is meant for. And what OPC router or what makes OPC router pretty unique are, from my perspective, two major points. The first point is really the ease of use. So I know everybody is, or every solution software vendor is telling you that their software solution is easy to use. But in the case of OPC router, you have a communication platform with a graphical user interface where you can really connect your different kinds of systems, don't matter what kind of system it is. You can easily connect those systems just via drag and drop. So you can pick boxes with a mouse and click on these boxes to choose the tags you would like to transfer, and you just click your data transfers together. Also, if it's connecting, I don't know, an ERP solution or SAP to a printer, so you can just define that connection by clicking without being a specialized expert, without, I don't know, 2 or 3 days of training, without any special knowledge about SAP or that printer solution. So that makes it really, really easy to use. So the operational simplicity really is one of the key features in OPC router. And the second thing which makes OPC router unique is what I mentioned already in the beginning. OPC router offers a lot of available plugins, protocols, and drivers to connect all your different kinds of systems. So it's not meant to only connect, I don't know, maybe PLCs with a cloud, or mainly to get data and put it into a database. So it's really supporting lots of different kinds of systems and connections, which you can see on that picture here. So that picture is not showing all of the available connections and plugins, but some of them. And as said today, we will focus on Siemens systems. So we will speak about how to connect to RFID systems from Siemens, how to connect to Siemens PLCs, how to connect to Siemens MindSphere as a cloud solution, and also to Siemens CNC machines. But in general, you can see you can connect all these systems with each other. So you can connect your SAP solution with a mail system and a barcode reader in parallel, or you can connect your Siemens MindSphere with an RFID system and a database at the same time, for example, and exchange data and create automated data workflows. So that's, as said, I don't want to bore you too long. I would now like to hand over to my colleague Andrea, and she will give you an overview of what's possible and how to do connections, how to create connections to Siemens systems.
Yeah, thank you, Thorsten, and also a warm welcome from my side. So I have some slides for today, a little bit different to most of the other OPC router training webinars. We already did a webinar for Siemens connectivity on the 7th September in this month. And there we already showed how to connect the Siemens world, Siemens devices via Siemens protocol or OPC UA client, or even if you have the numeric CNC machines with corresponding proprietary protocols that they provide via CapSurferX to different target systems. So this was the first step of this webinar series for this connecting Siemens, the Siemens world, I think is the best word description for that. So, for example, MES systems can act as an OPC client to CAP servers. The SAP plant connector can be an OPC client to CAP server, or you can use the IoT gateway to forward the data to different cloud systems. And we also discussed about the limitations and so on, and the possibility to extend the possibility to connect to the Siemens world via OPC router. So, for example, we can see here the OPC router connecting to CapSurferX as OPC or converter from the proprietary protocols to OPC protocol for connecting Siemens devices to many, many different systems. Perhaps we can first step in starting with a classic PLCs, you know, the S5 series, the S7 series, the logo PLCs. Therefore, we already use CapSurferX as converter, but with OPC router, we can also calculate in a more freely manner than with the CapSurfer integrated possibilities by using the in OPC router included calculator tool. And you can also add more complex logics with the included scripting possibilities of the OPC router. So if you want to make many, many complex things, then you can do that with the scripting functionalities. And you can structure your data just by using converter objects for CSV, for XML, for JSON, etc. And you can, for example, forward critical data from your Siemens PLCs or Siemens machines, numeric CNC machines and whatever, via email or telegram, or even send binary data like images via these two possibilities or other communication tools that you want to use for communication. For example, also WhatsApp is using a business RESTful interface to communicate via WhatsApp communication or WhatsApp tool with your critical data. You send this to responsible persons, for example, or target systems. I know, for example, in the past we sent emails to a converter portal that converted this to SMS, for example. This is the older version where most people now use Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever. So again, the numeric CNC machines, they are divided into different parts. They have head PLC, where you have the header information like production order information of the machine, state information. You have the numeric part, the NC, that is really responsible for the corresponding steering of the machine, for the head that manipulates the material. There we in most cases use the CapSurferX as converter to the OPC UA, but some of the newer versions of the SL series also already includes an OPC UA server that also could be directly accessed by OPC router. I wanted to write here. OPC UA is clear if you have an OPC server, but also, this OPC UA server that is integrated does not provide all NC data. So if you need the NC data themselves, it still would be better to use the CapSurferX to directly connect to the NC part of the machine. So in addition to having many target systems available, Thorsten already mentioned some. You can, for example, use the SAP connection with a native SAP interface. This is an addition to the CAP server X that only can provide the OPC server functionality to communicate with SAP. Or you can directly communicate with SAP HANA or with the SAP HANA database, or you connect to any type of databases, SQL databases, or also document-oriented database, or also with InfluxDB if you have process values and want to send some more process values in a very effective way. Then you can use InfluxDB, for example, as target system. Let's come to the example connecting OPC router or this Siemens devices, or perhaps also other devices that you can connect with CAP server X or with OPC router or any other IT system to the Siemens MindSphere cloud system. So I do not want to talk too much about the MindSphere basics. I think the most important thing is that you know that it uses some kind of cloud to be able to communicate via IoT, via Internet of Things. So we personally use the Mqtt protocol. Also a RESTful protocol called Smart REST is available to communicate to MindSphere. But in our example, we connect via Mqtt. Of course, if you want to connect to the MindSphere, you first must log on to the Siemens MindSphere portal. We have an internal example here. You create, normally you have your own link. Then you can click on MindConnect IoT extension. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous today. This sometimes happens. And there you can create a user by open the menu and click on administration. Yeah, you can see it here in the screenshot. Then you click on user. And there you, of course, insert the corresponding username. Sorry, it's still some syntax error. The password, you have to repeat the password. Then you activate the possibility to setting it as a device management user, and then you can save this user. So now this user is available to use for connection with the OPC router. So now you can go to the Mqtt configuration in the OPC router. You see this is the graphical interface where you have the vertical menu here, and you have the plugins under cloud. You can select Mqtt and insert the name, insert the cloud profile. You can directly use the Mqtt default in this example because there is no specific cloud profile for the Siemens MindSphere. And then under setting options, connection setting options, you insert the broker host, you insert the port, and the security settings are already per default. Then you insert a client ID. This is the device with which you want to send data. And you have a username. This is in the form of the tenant and the username. And then the password, of course, that you have configured for the OPC user. And then you can check connection. And if everything is OK, you can click on OK. I have one little example shown here. On the top, you know, for those of you who already knows OPC router, after setting the plugin settings, setting up the connection, you can set the connection productive for the data transfer, and under the status tab you can see how the system is running. So on the bottom part you can see again the type of connection. So you have a time trigger here that cyclically every 5 seconds starts the data transfer. We have many other triggers available. We will have a practical example a bit later. And we have a constant value here that is 101. This means we want to select from a database which is configured as FIS InMove database, and we have a table that is called we_live data. This means this is a view for the live data that FIS InMove provides, and the config ID filter is for the measurement ID. So the measurement ID 101 is the one that is interesting for us, and we want to get the current value for the temperature. And we get the value 25 in this transfer step. And we have a text replace that formats the value to the corresponding content format, because there's a really specific format to send data to the MindSphere. This is something where we got some limitations on the CapServerX in the last webinar on CapServerX connecting Siemens, where it is not possible to easily configure this format here. So we have the 200 as information that we want to send the current value. The value name is or parameter name is the temperature, the unit is Celsius, 25 degrees, and the Celsius, the C for Celsius is the short unit. And we send this to the payload of the Mqtt message that is connected to our MindSphere Mqtt broker. And on the top, we see the screenshot of the current connection, where we can see what is the status. It is ready to react on the trigger, on the time trigger. So every 5 seconds it would trigger. So we can see the dots here every 5 seconds. And the dot mean there has a data transfer taking place. And we see on the left side, on the Y axis, how long it takes. You see sometimes it takes almost 500 milliseconds, but also sometimes we are almost at 0 milliseconds. So we can be very fast. So you get many information. And for those who are not, for them, it is not enough to see this graphic here. You can also use these glasses here to have a look at the table view of the historic data transfer. If you want to get further information on the monitoring of the MindSphere data that you send to the MindSphere cloud, or to get an example tutorial, what I have done here in short in the slides, you find it at the corresponding link here, opcrouter.com, Siemens MindSphere IoT Mqtt connection. You can connect via this link here, or you can go to the opcrouter.com website under plugins, select the Mqtt plugin, and there you find in the text the information on different target systems, also to the MindSphere system, and use that link. Okay, enough for the theoretical things. Now let's come to a practical example. Oh no, sorry. I must drink some coffee, I think. First, I have some additional information on Siemens RFID devices. On the plugin, OPC Router plugin itself, it supports manufacturer independent all RFID devices, which supports the RFID Auto ID OPC UA companion specification. And the Siemens devices that support RFID Auto ID by Siemens' own information are, for example, the RF600 series and the RF18XC series, which you can configure, or the OPC server of it can be configured via web-based management. Okay, but that was enough. Is there any question until now before we come to our examples? Okay, I get no information, though I think in the moment there's no question. So let's.
Okay. So one question is coming from Tassin. He's asking if the presentation, the slides, will be shared with a webinar recording. The answer is no, but we will send out the link to the recording, but not the slides directly. But if you need the slides, maybe you can ask and we can send it directly to you, or so in a personal email. So if you would like to use the slides, we can discuss this afterwards. And there's another question from John. Is there a matrix that shows which license is required for which plugin? The answer, I think, is also no. I think in that case, if you're not sure which plugin you will need to connect to which kind of device, it makes sense to directly connect with us, and we can tell you which plugin would solve your data transfer the best, because it really depends on what you're trying to do. In some cases, for example, people, if they would like to connect to SAP, some of them use the SAP plugin. Some of them would like to use a web service and use the SOAP web service plugin, and some of them connect to an SAP database via ODBC or via REST. So it really depends on what you're planning to do. Just let us know your question and your kind of project, and we will discuss with you which would be the perfect plugin. Okay.
Yeah.
I think you can go on, Andrea. I will try to answer the other questions through the chat.
Okay, thank you. Just another question to the corresponding participants. There's someone who did not mute his microphone. Okay, I think now it is corrected. Thank you. So let's start with an easy example. So, oops, sorry, I did move forward, so it stepped over my slide. But I can tell you, so we first want to send send an example or show an example how to download, for example, the order number into an RFID tag. So first, of course, before we can communicate with an RFID server, it's an OPC UA server, you know, because it's OPC UA companion specification. So we can go to the OPC router plugins part. I already opened it here. And we have the local service and we have the cloud IoT. Oh, no, not cloud IoT. Of course, it's OPC UA, so it's situated on the shop floor. But we do not go to the OPC UA plugin because we do not want to communicate via normal OPC UA. We want to directly use the companion specification Auto ID. So under RFID reader here, we have the RFID reader plugin part. And there we can create new plugin instances, and I have one instance called Demo RFID, where I have given a name, where I do not use a certificate. These are all the almost the same settings that you do for OPC server. You can use certificates if you want to. You can use authentication if you want to. You must insert the endpoint. Here, this is my local example. And you can insert the security settings. You know, this is none, sign, and encrypt. And if you want to, you can also directly use the highest available security level if you want to use that from the target system. So the first specific configuration setting is to select the RFID reader name. If you have configured the connection settings correctly, then you do not need to use the check button. You can do, but you can select the RFID reader name. And you can select the scan mode. The scan mode, I think we can also directly jump in here. You can use scan manually. Not every RFID reader provides this, that it inform the client automatically when there is a tag in the area. Then you can scan in a regular interval, or you can scan in background. The difference between the regular interval and the background mainly is that if you use a regular interval, then you would scan it once. Oh no, you scan both in a regular interval, but you can in addition set the trigger if our RFID was not captured for defined time. So if you plug the or bring the tag in the area, then you can say if it isn't if it is already read within the last 5 seconds, it will not be read again. So it triggers once, and then you can wait until you get it off. And if you waited 5 seconds, then it would come back again and react on it again if you use the trigger for this. So the scan mode and the trigger if our RFID tag was not captured for defined time are for the triggering. You also can inform the trigger only to trigger if the signal strength has a minimum strength reached. So if it is only at the edge of the range, so you will not be informed that there is a tag inside the range or in the area. Okay, I hope this was not too confusing for my switching information here. So after we have configured the plugin, we can click on OK to save it. I have already prepared, so I just use the cancel button here, and we can step over to the connections tab. So on the connections tab under local service, I have already a folder other. We can create another folder for the webinar today, for the webinar OPC Router and Siemens. And we can create a new connection. In our first example, I told you that we want to download the production order number into the corresponding RFID tag. So I would say download PO, no. And then we have on the middle our design surface, and on the right side we have the possibility for the source and target objects. In this example, I just want to connect to the RFID reader and write a tag. So I can double click on it, just select the instance. There are no more settings that we have to do. So what do we need here? So we have different input possibilities. We can insert the region, the offset, the password if you want to. We have the data and the scan information. And we get back the status as output. So perhaps we can first connect the status to a target. So we can use a variable, double click on it after I drag and dropped it inside, and I have the status code here. So I can go to the status output parameter and left click, hold the mouse button down and connect to the status code variable to connect them both. So what do we need at the minimum as input? We need the scan information. So we can directly use the RFID reader synchronous scan to read which tag is in our range, in our area where the scanner, where the RFID reader is working. So I also only have to select the instance here, so it's very easy to configure, and I get all the information that are available. We also could insert some information like the duration to scan, the cycles, the data available, location type, but we only need the output for the scan information. Yes, because the scan information contains all the identifier of the tag. So we use the scan information and send it to the scan information from the right tag transfer object. The necessary information we want to write is the production order number. So this is the data parameter on the right tag transfer object. This we want to select out of our SQL database. So we have a database connection here. For those who haven't already worked with database target and OPC router under plugins, we also have a part for the storage relational database Microsoft SQL. This is a SQL Express database that I have here. It's my training DB on this local data virtual machine. I use the Windows authentication in my example. You also could use a SQL user. The OPC router configuration is running with the logged on Windows user. If you use it with the OPC router service, this is running under the system context. So if it is not locally then but remote, the OPC router runtime service would access or authenticate with its computer name instead of a username. You can change this, of course, at the OPC router runtime service settings in the services part of the Windows operating system. So we can check connection to make sure that all the settings are correctly. So I will click cancel here and we can go back to our connection that is already here in the tabs part, download PONO, and we would double click to edit the database transfer object. We can connect to the training database. If you only have one, that you will always get selected automatically. And we have different types to access this database target via select, insert, update, delete, and start procedures. You see this is the normal SQL thing that you connect to. So we could use the select one. We have our production orders table with the current available production orders. And I want to send the production order number. And we have a possibility to filter. So I would filter on the line, of course. I have one machine in my example that I want to get the information for. And I have some kind of transfer column. So the transfer column in my example means if this value is 0, this is the current running production order number. So perhaps we do not know this on the machine, but the product or has its own RFID tag and should know which production order it is running for. So this is the reason why we want to write it down to the tag now, to the RFID tag. So this is 0 and the query we don't want to change because we do not want to close the current running production order. So we do not change the recordings. We do not need to sort it. And we would abort the transfer if we have no one to write. And of course, I want to limit it to one element because I only want to download one production order. So I want to filter on the line in the transfer state. So I need some constant value object. So I use the line 2 in my example, and the transfer state should be 0 as I stated before. So I connect the constant value 2 to the line and the constant value 0 to the transfer state. So when we have our corresponding production order, we want to send it to the tag. According to that, we use hexadecimal strings here. I must format it first. Therefore, I can use the calculator and I can double click on it and I need a formula. So I use an easy formula. I first append leading zeros. So I would use the concatenate function, concatenate. I use leading zeros. You have the possibility to either send one hexadecimal string byte or an hexadecimal string word. So I would use 16 zeros to append before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So And then I have my production order number, of course, also into these signs that that it can interpret it as a string, and the placeholder PO, of course, should exist. So I created with a new button here. If you want to, you can also test it here to make sure that it is right. So we append this number, but we only want to have the right 16 elements. So we snip off the leading zeros now. So we say right, sorry, bracket, and after this concatenation, I tell it that I want to have 16 characters. And I can test it again, and I can insert here 1, 2, 3, and you see that it's moving to the front. If you do not know that concatenate means concatenate, you have the further button here to select the corresponding function. Okay. So now we just input the production order number from the database, because in our example would be 145 as an example, and we can output the value to the corresponding data input parameter of the right tech transfer object. Yeah, so we've read the corresponding tag, which is in the area. I just will put 1 on. And you cannot see it because I have no video here, sorry for that. And then, and in addition, we read the corresponding current production order out of the table. Production orders table, concatenate the corresponding leading zeros to fill up to 16 characters. And afterwards, when we write it to the tag, we get the information whether this was done successfully or not. So now we have everything despite a trigger. I think in this example, we just will trigger it manually because I can place it and then trigger it. And we have the corresponding production order on it. So I set this productive. I set it again productive. And then we can go to the status tab and select the download PO now. We can see it is already initialized. It's now ready. So I can trigger it manually. Trigger connection. Yes. So the corresponding current production order is the 145 that it selects, and it fills in the leading zero. You can see it here. And the synchronous scan also did it work. It selected the corresponding tag that is in the reach or in the range, and it writes the tag, and we get the success information. Is there any question on this first writing example?
Not in the chat.
Okay, then I will step forward to the, I think, more interesting part. So we can go back to the connections tab, right click here, create a new connection. And now we want to get the corresponding target information from, in our example, the database. You also could ask the SAP system for the corresponding recipe information or whatever, but we would use the database table as a target. So we say Rfid trigger and read PO data. So what should we do starting? So let's start with the triggers here, because we, in our example, there is a product or bag or something like the container, anything containing an RFID tag, and it comes into the area or in the range of our RFID reader. So the RFID reader is our source. So in this example, we would use the RFID reader trigger as source. And it is an asynchronous scan, so we would use that. You cannot do anything wrong because it's the only trigger here, so don't doubt. So we can double click here on the asynchronous trigger, and we see again only the instances to select. So it's very easy. You cannot make many things wrong. So the trigger has some information for us. For example, the antenna that is collecting the signal strength, the timestamp, the power level, and again the scan information and the scan data. And the scan information is again the one that identifies the tag that is in the area. So we again can now use the synchronous scan to read the tag. So we can use a double click. Just a moment. So of course we can use the read tag to read from the corresponding trigger, And there we have the scan information. So we can send the scan information from the trigger to the read tag transfer object, because we want to read it, of course, and not scan what tag is in the area. And we can get back the result data. So in our case, it would be the value with a production order number. And we get the status, whether it was read successfully. You also see the additional other input parameters as we had before, because sometimes you have to identify with the password, for example, to get the information. So the result data is our production order number, and with that, again, we can go to our production order table, double click, training database. We again would select the data, the corresponding information, but in this example, we have the production order number and we have the line, and we want to read the target amount that we should use. We also could use the article ID and some other parameter. I think one parameter would be enough for a simple example. And we, of course, would filter again on the line. And we have the production order number, so we can identify the production order by its number. And in the query, we would also need to sort. We do not want to change the records. We would interpret it as a read or error, because if the tag is there with the corresponding production order number, there should be some recipe or target information for the production order. And I have only one element on the, or simple element on the OPC side where I want to write it. So I will limit it to the number of records 1. So I go with the result data to the line. It doesn't matter that we have the leading zeros in again. I know this is a hex string. I do something without converting here, just directly use the numbers and send it to the line. This is an int32 data type, so it would convert it and delete the leading zeros itself. And the constant, of course, the result data is the production order, and the line would be the line 2. Okay, and we want to send the target information to our machine. Therefore, I also have an OPC server connected, and I can use the OPC data access. This is my local CAP server X with a local endpoint, username, password, sign and encrypt, and certificate for authentication, or not authentication, for trustworthy. So I can use the tag browser here to select the target amount. So under machine 1, I have my PLC. Of course, we can use machine 1 because we have selected line 2. So let's use machine 1 PLC, production data, target data. and we have the target amount. We also can send the product ID down, so we can say OK. And we have the target amount here from the production orders table, and the result data would be the product ID. I can move it a bit so later we can see it on the diagnostic. So we have everything. We have a trigger when to trigger when there is a tag inside the area that has not been read for 5 seconds. We read the value out of the tag, select the corresponding target amount, and write the information to the PLC. So now we can set it productive. We step over. And wait for the connection to be initialized. And you see it was orange for initialization. Now it is green for being ready. And I can step the tag that I have written, or where I have written the production order value. So we see the coding information. We see the production order number to the database as filter, and also to the OPC server, to the machine 2, and the corresponding target amount from the data table. And if I take it away for minimum 5 seconds, I can put the other one on. And you see there just a moment. Yes, it wasn't selected really. It takes the code for the other one, and there we get another production order number. This is the 0 one. I have told you before that I will take the other one that I have not written to. And we see that there were no data read, and we get an error. And if I change it, and again, tag the other one on where I have some information, we again get the corresponding production order number and the corresponding target amount. So we have 5 minutes left. Is there any question?
At the moment, I don't see any question in the chat.
I hope I was not too fast, and that the nervousy did not do any harm on the transport on my messages. That there are no questions, or perhaps anything is clear and you say, wow, great, we will use OPC router for RFID or Siemens connectivity on all the Siemens systems.
Okay. So you're done with your live demo, Andrea?
Yes, I think so, because on the
Okay.
time, so I do not would do an additional.
Okay, so still no question until now. What I will do is I will share another 2 slides, and maybe there will come up some other questions during that time. So let's share my screen once again. So this is just for you, for all of you, for your information about what OPC Router webinars are still coming this year. So today has been the special webinar training about Siemens connectivity. In October, we will have another OPC router basic training. So if you're a beginner or a starter with OPC router and you would like to know about the basics, how to create data transfers and how to create connections and all that stuff, how to use the plug and play mechanisms of OPC router, or one of your colleagues, please feel free to register for that training. In November, it might be for a bit advanced OPC router users, as we will be presenting how to use scripting and giving you some valuable scripting examples. And in December, We will speak about a notification via, for example, the email and Telegram plugin. Especially the email plugin has been enriched this week. So 2 days ago, on Tuesday, we released version 4.18 of OPC Router, which enhanced the email plugin so that we not only can send out emails through OPC Router, but we also can receive and read emails with OPC Router now. So this also will be, I think, a very interesting webinar in December. And as there are still no questions, thank you very much for your participation from our side. Thank you very much for Andrea for preparing the demo and doing the presentation. So nobody had the feeling that you're nervous because you're a professional. So nobody is feeling that. It must be only you. So thank you very much for that. And as said, if there should be any questions afterwards, just send us an email at sales@inray.de or visit our opcrouter.com website where you can find your local distributor. And you also can, of course, connect with our local partners in your country and in your time zone to ask questions in local language. Thank you very much for now, and we hope to see you on one of the next training webinars. And we are wishing you a good day and to stay healthy. Thank you very much, and bye-bye. And I think we can stop the recording now.
Yeah, I try.